You can still see the slides, right? Yeah, okay. Beautiful. Cool. Now I can see my speaker notes too.
Excellent.
Even better.
Hello, everybody. I believe we should be live now. If I actually knew what I was doing with the session sharing thing, I'd have the YouTube link open so that I can see myself live. So let me push that button and just confirm. Yes, we are live. Excellent. So I have the great pleasure this afternoon to introduce Kendall, who is even more of a Doctor Who fan than I am, talking about OpenStack and Kubernetes, both of which are technologies that I have more experience with than I really wish, but are massively useful and pretty much unavoidable in the work that I do. So without any further ado, let's welcome Kendall.
Hello. Thank you for having me here today. I am very excited to be speaking at my first PyCon today. I'm Kendall Nelson. I work for the Open Infrastructure Foundation, and I've been an open source contributor since I graduated from university, which is about 6 years now. I originally started working on OpenStack for IBM. Actually, I was employed there before my current job, and I started in 2015 on OpenStack. And then a few years later, and I can't believe it's already been a few years now, I started working on Kubernetes as well. So I'm definitely familiar with big, awesome open source communities like the Python community. But this is my first PyCon, so I'm very excited to be here. As mentioned before, I am definitely a big Doctor Who fan, as you may have been able to tell from the title of this presentation. I also love Harry Potter and traveling when that's a thing. Obviously not a thing right now, but hopefully soon. And I also do a lot of running in my spare time, whatever that looks like. Don't have a whole lot of spare time. But jumping right in, we will start with some overviews of the two projects, and then we'll get into how they fit together. So Kubernetes, an enormous community. They collaborate together to work on automating deployment for scaling, management, and that sort of thing of containerized applications. It's written in Go primarily. Their most recent release was version 1.22, which came out a few weeks ago, I think. And it started in 2014, so it's been around for about 7 years now. So in terms of open source projects, like, you know, getting past those teenage years, starting to like stabilize and certainly has grown in popularity in the last 7 years as well. But it was originally developed by Google and given to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And since then, it's become a graduated project, and there are dozens of repositories and an enormous community of thousands of people and global events that happen every year, several times a year, in fact. Next week, KubeCon, that was originally going to be in Europe, was rescheduled to be in North America, and that'll be virtual and in person both. So it's a hybrid event taking place next week. And if you're interested in more information generally on what Kubernetes has to offer, you can check out kubernetes.io. OpenStack, on the other hand, is an open source cloud operating system. It's written in Python, everybody's favorite language here, hopefully. The most recent release actually came out this Wednesday, which was 2 days ago now. I know what day it is. And that was the Xena release. So it's the 24th release of OpenStack. It started in 2010 as a joint project between Rackspace and NASA for processing data. And it was the OpenStack Foundation, now the Open Infrastructure Foundation, was created for it in 2012. Man, it's early, but not that early. So, but yeah, if you're interested in more information on OpenStack, please check out openstack.org. We also have an awesome global community with tons of contributors like Kubernetes and Python. So containers or virtual machines is generally the core of the debate between Kubernetes and OpenStack. So simply put, virtual machines are like a dedicated stack from the kernel to the libraries and the application itself. And they are isolated from any other workload that might be running in the cloud. So this separation might be important for security reasons or because they're separate users and maybe you're billing based on like the amount of compute that is being used. But it's much more isolated, separated. And containers, on the other hand, use the same kernel of a container hypervisor, and they can share libraries and the binaries and everything, even the application layer. This gives you a much more lightweight and fast way of spinning things up and smashing out a workload and then throwing it away when you're done with running the workload, whatever that may be. So it can definitely be more cost effective for jobs with like finite goals. But because you're sharing a lot of the libraries and binaries and the hypervisor or the kernel, there's not as much isolation. So in the very beginning, there was this debate. Well, are we using OpenStack or Kubernetes? Because how would we use them both? We can't use them both. That doesn't make sense. Like one is better than the other, surely. And they definitely don't go together. No, Fishfingers and Custard. That's ridiculous. Disgusting. But the thing is, you can use them together in a variety of ways, even though it might not sound like you can. And they can be leveraged on separate layers of the stack to have greater agility in your workload, how it's performing. Obviously, more security because of the way virtual machines work and general flexibility of the whole stack. So there are a number of ways that they fit together. Are you gonna, eat your fish finger and then like a scoop of custard, or are you going to dip your fish fingers in the custard, or maybe spread the custard on top of the fish finger? Lots of different ways of doing it. So one of the ways of running them together is OpenStack in a container. So there are a number of OpenStack projects that I'll talk about today. The first two of which are Cola and OpenStack Helm. So together, they allow you to containerize OpenStack or the OpenStack control plane to ease deployment and management of your cloud. So I'll get into a little bit more of the use cases later on, but this is one way that you can use the two technologies together. So you have like a containerized OpenStack. So that's example number one. Example number two is containers on top of OpenStack. So Kubernetes is designed to run within a cloud, and also to expect that the cloud provide multi-tenant isolation between different Kubernetes clusters. So you need some of that isolation. Your Kubernetes cluster has to run somewhere, and OpenStack is definitely a strong contender of a way of supplying this multi-tenant isolation that Kubernetes needs to run and succeed at processing those workloads. So the third example, one that I am more involved with, is cloud provider OpenStack, and well, not just the cloud storage integration plugins with Kubernetes, but there are a variety of plugins actually. So the cloud storage integration plugins are just two examples. Cloud provider OpenStack is a sub-team of SIG cloud provider in the Kubernetes community. And basically what this does is interfaces and allows you to use OpenStack services like Cinder and Manila, which are block storage and file storage services that that OpenStack provides. They can be run standalone to supplement your Kubernetes cluster. So basically, you have your workload and you run it, and you need to store something somewhere. Well, okay, where are you going to store it? Like, Kubernetes doesn't really provide storage, but the cloud storage integration plugins that are that we've developed for Cinder and Manila allow you to store whatever data it is that you're getting out the other side. There are also plugins for authentication with our Keystone service in OpenStack. And also, I think Barbican is the other one for secrets storage as well. And there's also the Octavia plugin, which is for load balancing. So there are a variety of OpenStack services that can be run without Nova, which is the normal compute project that most of the OpenStack services rely on. These ones can be run standalone so that you don't need Nova. Then they will, with cloud provider OpenStack, supplement what Kubernetes can provide you. So gives you a lot of flexibility, and another way of eating your fish fingers and custard together. So kind of to summarize, they do go together. Whether, you like fish fingers and custard, or maybe you prefer milk and cookies. I like both. OpenStack and Kubernetes do work together, and one didn't replace the other. Neither one is dead. They're both enormous communities for you to leverage in your cloud. And using the two technologies together, you get a lot more flexibility, agility, security than you'd have using one alone. So I have a few words are lost on me at this point. I have a few examples, actually, of some of these use cases. So OpenStack in a container, two use cases, big companies that we've seen, or organizations rather, that we've seen using OpenStack in a container are SK Telecom, South Korea Telecom, for those that are unaware, and also CERN, if you're familiar with the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland and France, the giant research project, which is so cool. I've been there, and it's awesome. Highly recommend if you ever get a chance to go visit. But so SK Telecom, they focus on automated continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines around containerized OpenStack on Kubernetes. So this example of OpenStack in a container. Basically, what SK Telecom does is they automatically build and test both OpenStack containers and Helm charts. Daily, they automatically install highly available OpenStack deployments. So they have their tiny little OpenStack in a container, and they're able to spin those up, run their tests, and then tear them down really quickly. And with OpenStack Helm, this is very easy to do because it's all scripted. If you are familiar with Helm charts, Helm is a Kubernetes project that allows you to deploy your Kubernetes clusters a little bit more easily and quickly. So basically, this gives them like simple and easy installation because it's all scripted. Kubernetes provides the cluster auto healing for when there are larger issues. Because they're spinning up OpenStack and tearing it down so quickly, they're able to have more recent releases of OpenStack. And this altogether gives fast and flexible rollouts of cluster updates, and also secure and secret and configuration management. CERN, on the other hand, they have an enormous cluster themselves. Both companies, or organizations, I should say. CERN's not a company, exactly. Both use different tools. So CERN, they use the Magnum project, which is an OpenStack project instead of Helm being a Kubernetes one. And basically what that does is it provides a simple API to fully deploy managed clusters backed by several application platforms, including Kubernetes. So it's an example of how Kubernetes deployment systems that rely on OpenStack APIs with the cloud provider plugin. So they do use that third example a little bit that I mentioned as well. So like right now, how CERN uses OpenStack and Kubernetes together, that's being used to manage over 200 independent federated Kubernetes installations on top of CERN's OpenStack on-site cloud, as well as some other partner clouds that they use as well. So it's crazy to see it being used at that scale. Kubernetes on top of OpenStack. One example is VexHost, who is a sponsor of the OpenStack Foundation or Open Infrastructure Foundation now. VexHost is a high-performance cloud computing company that provides public and private cloud offerings. They're originally started in Canada, but they have grown and have regions all over the world now. And their like base cloud is powered by OpenStack, and they run the most recent release of OpenStack. They upgrade basically the day the release comes out. The CEO, Mohammed Nasser, is actually an upstream developer in the OpenStack community, and he's very, very involved in the development and direction of OpenStack. But they also have certified, the VexHost cloud is also certified Kubernetes. So they provide Kubernetes clusters if that's where you want to run your application and your workloads. They have all of that living on top of OpenStack. So I am a little bit ahead of time, so I'm going to like hop back to OpenStack and Kubernetes. So I talked about Kubernetes, that they're like a global community. They're full of like different groups, API working group, or SIG. Oh, geez. Let me start over. They organize themselves into SIGs primarily, instead of per repository teams like OpenStack does. So they've got a little bit different structure, but they obviously, like I said, we're meeting next week where OpenStack, we are organized into that per repository structure team primarily. And we have an event coming up in 2 weeks called the Project Team Gathering, where developers get together. It's a virtual event. Developers get together and they talk about like the next release that's coming up and how we can better integrate with other software and technology. So we actually have time scheduled with the Kubernetes steering committee for the last day of the OpenStack technical committee's conversations to better continue to grow these relationships and see how much more, how many more fans of Fishfingers and Custard we can get today. So hopefully I've given you a little bit of an overview in the way these things fit together. If you're interested in more details on any of them, I would suggest either joining either one of the communities, certainly. On the Kubernetes side, that SIG cloud provider is a really good place to start. On the OpenStack side, it's a little bit different because we're organized differently. But just joining the mailing list and some of those teams that I mentioned, like Courier and OpenStack Helm and Cola, are all really great teams and places to start. Oh, Magnum as well. Cannot forget them. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed my presentation today, and I hope that I'm get to come back and speak at other PyCons again someday, because this was an awesome experience. If we have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you for that. We haven't had any questions coming through yet, but people might still be digesting the information.
Yeah.
But in the absence of a live audience, I'm going to close you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks. So while we wait for any audience questions, too, if I have a question.
Sure.
Pretty much everyone running Kubernetes these days, if they're not a gigantic organization who operates their own data centers, is running in somebody else's cloud.
Yeah.
Are there any benefits to using various components of OpenStack if you're already in a cloud that provides many of the same APIs and services?
So are you asking about like setting up your own OpenStack cloud in-house, or
in the cloud rather than in-house?
Okay. So using like an OpenStack cloud instead of like Azure or Microsoft Azure, or like GCP or something like that?
Either instead of, or on top of, or inside of.
Okay. I think it's largely going to depend on like your workloads and the application that you're running, as with many things, many technical decisions. But I think that in general, the community support that you get with OpenStack, being a global open source project, is going to be better than, unless you're, a flush company that can pay for the excellent service that, Microsoft and Amazon and Google can all provide. I think there are a lot of benefits to being able to interface with an open source community, and OpenStack is definitely fully open source, practices the four opens of open design, open communication, open development, and open source. So if there are issues that you run into, they are going to love to hear your feedback, and being able to access the code to fix things yourself, I think, is really helpful to understand how things work, being able to go and dig through everything rather than dealing with a little bit of a black box that you can't figure out what's going on inside. But also, if there are new features that you're interested in, we love hearing from users and operators and knowing what your use case requires. The other thing about using an open source tool like OpenStack is it's going to be generally much more tested, and all of the little edge cases and that sort of thing are going to be discovered because it's being used by a lot more people in a lot of different ways. So, for example, from last year to this year, our user survey that we have for OpenStack saw 100 new clouds being spun up. We have 100 new cloud providers that are running OpenStack as their cloud for selling as a service. But the clouds also have been growing immensely too. So there's a lot more tests being done in terms of scalability and just the large scale nature of it. Walmart, I think, is over 1 million cores now in their OpenStack cloud, and they aren't the only one either. There are, I think, 6 or 7 that we found in our user survey this last year that are over 1 million cores. So it's definitely has a lot more support and robust community around it that I think is what makes OpenStack as successful and awesome as it is. Looks like we've got a question from Simon. Kubernetes and OpenStack feel big and complicated. Fair, totally fair. Are there situations where one can benefit from them without having to learn everything at once? Yes, definitely. There are a number of companies like VexHost that provide a OpenStack powered cloud with managed or unmanaged, I think, Kubernetes offerings. So you yourself don't actually have to learn all of the ins and outs of how to deploy everything. If you know more about Kubernetes and you want to interface with that, then there are companies like VexHost that you can go to. I am not sure of any off the top of my head, but I expect that there are ones that are the opposite, where you have a Kubernetes cluster and then a containerized OpenStack if you'd rather be interacting with an OpenStack installation. That I would have to go look up and get back to you. But there are definitely offerings, so you don't need to run it yourself. So hopefully that helps. Looks like we've got another question from Julian. What does your day-to-day work as an upstream developer advocate involve? Lots of different things. So I really love my job because it is so diverse, and day to day I work on something completely different. I have the awesome opportunity to work both upstream in OpenStack and Kubernetes, though I do a little bit less Kubernetes work than OpenStack. So some days I do development. Some days I teach people how to contribute to OpenStack. Some days I'm, just joining a lot of meetings, as we're all probably familiar with. And then other days I am coming to conferences like this one and presenting. Lots of different things. I have roles in the OpenStack community as a member of the technical committee, and I've run the technical elections and done community management stuff, but I've also developed on the Cinder project, on the Storyboard project, on the OpenStack SDK and OpenStack client. And in the Kubernetes community, I'm involved in SIG contributor experience and SIG cloud provider. And I also attend the Kubernetes steering committee meetings. So lots of different things. I love open source, though. I found it right out of university, and it has been my most favorite thing because I get to meet so many awesome people and make friends with people all over the world. And it just gives me so much joy to know that things that I've written for, work are now being used to discover, well, obviously the Higgs boson has already been discovered, but CERN continues to do experiments, and I'm sure we'll learn something amazing from them soon. And code that I've written for Cinder is deployed at CERN and is being used to store the data from the experiments that they run. So that's awesome. Meeting people, awesome. Love it. Love being an upstream developer advocate. Do we have any other questions?
Cool, thank you. I did see some typing in Discord briefly, but it doesn't seem to have appeared. It doesn't seem to have turned into a question.
That's great. Yeah.
So I think, there is more typing happening. So while we wait for the possible question to arrive, what's your favorite Doctor Who episode?
Oh, that is a tough question. So I have a short list of episodes that I give to people when they haven't seen Doctor Who before and they're not sure if they want to watch all of it. So it's The Girl in the Fireplace from starting at the beginning. Well, yes, that's series 2. So the very first season is probably the Doctor Dances and Are You My Mummy, I think is the first one. And because it's a 2-part, and then Girl in the Fireplace, and then Blink probably, and then Donna. Which Donna episode do I like? I don't know. But jumping into Matt Smith, I really, really like the Van Gogh episode, a lot. And yeah, even the new female doctor, she is awesome. I really enjoy her a lot. but Peter Capaldi was great too. David Tennant was my first doctor, so I like him the best, but Matt was definitely very entertaining. I don't know. What was your favorite? Oh,
Blink was probably the one that stuck with me the most and the one I've lost the most sleep over.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
it's terrifying thinking about the number of like statues that are around, and you're like, oh no, oh no, that's terrible.
We have a question that David claims isn't a real question. Is over 1 million cores megacore?
Megacore. Well, I don't know about megacore, but there's like the hyperscale is a thing. But megacore sounds way cooler for sure. But yeah, hyperscale is a thing, and I think that 1 million cores constitutes as hyperscale. But yeah.
Well, I've never had to work in megacores, but a lot of my Kubernetes configuration involves hundreds of millicores.
Yeah,
which
they
add
can
up
get
quite
really
quickly.
big. It's very cool to see how OpenStack and Kubernetes can fit together and like the scales that it can grow to. In November, the Open Infrastructure Foundation will be having a like streaming event for 2 days called Open Infra Live. Keynotes, I guess, is like the extra little bit on the end. And there, I think they'll have finished processing all the information from that user survey that I was talking about. So at that point, there should be more information on like how these things fit together and the scales and the different companies that are running them together, because we discover new clouds every year that we do the user survey. So yeah.
Cool. So that seems to be it for the questions. So where should people look for more information, and how can we get hold of you if we have questions that come up later or from people who watch the video after the conference?
So email is always great. knelson@openinfra.dev is my email address. Otherwise, you can just poke me on Twitter there, knelson92. I also hang out on IRC because I'm old school and OpenStack loves IRC. So on the OFTC network, I am Diablo Rojo, actually. It would have been really smart for me to standardize across the board, but unfortunately did not do that. But yeah, reach out to me. However, any of those ways would be great. I am also on the Kubernetes Slack as Diablo Rojo, so that I at least got standardized. If you have any more questions, let me know. I am happy to make introductions to anybody in either one of the communities. If you're interested in getting involved and starting to contribute, I am definitely the person to ask for OpenStack, as I spend a lot of time teaching people how to contribute and developing the documentation and programs we have around that. And I have been tangentially involved in the Kubernetes community on that sort of thing as well. And I know a lot of those people. They're spectacular. So I'm happy to answer anything that comes up after the show or help you get involved. Hopefully, you love open source like I do, but attending PyCon and watching PyCon videos would make me think that you do. So it was lovely to meet you all. Thank you very much for having me today.
Cool. Thank you very much. And let's end off with one more.
Thank you.
Okay.